We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about 3 baits that will cover all 3 sections of the water column: the bottom, the middle, and the top. And best of all, they are way more weedless than you ever thought they were. Stick around, we're going to talk all about it. There we go. First cast. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to lowbrow fishing. And you know, if there's one thing old lowbrow knows about, it's fishing grass. Every lake in my area is choked with vegetation. Milfoil, hydrilla, all sorts of different types of grasses. Very rarely do I actually get to fish bare bottom. The vegetation plays a big factor whenever I'm working a presentation, whenever I'm rigging a bait. And the thing about it is I've actually developed or been taught different ways of working baits to make them much more weedless. Baits that you probably would never guess are actually very weedless, especially since a lot of them have an open hook. And we've discussed a few of them before. You know, obviously you're going to have a frog, you're going to have a Texas rig, things of that nature. The Waco rig I designed simply because, well, I wanted to fish a wacky rig in a vegetated area, and a wacky rig doesn't work so well in that instance. However, there are other baits with some simple modifications, with simple ways that we work them that can be very weedless. Case in point, a NACO rig. Just a simple stick bait with a nail weight in the bottom of it. That's all this is. You've got the O-ring, and I've got a VMC nail weight here in the bottom of it. And you would say, well, lowbrow, that's got an open hook. That's not going to be very weedless at all. Every time I use a NACO rig, it just gets gummed up. Well, if you make a simple modification, it can be very weedless. And the eagle-eye viewers among you have already seen what I've done. Can you tell? It's how I hook that NACO rig. You see how I've got it hooked? I've got the weight down here, and I put the hook shank where the barb is on the bottom. What that does is that causes this hook shank right here to act as a good bit of a weed guard. It protects that tip. Now, is it going to be completely weedless? No. Not even a Texas rig or a frog is completely weedless. A lot of times, you're going to get a little bit of grass on it. But it will come through the slop a lot better than, well, you ordinarily would think it would. This will actually fish through the grass quite well. Do I have a few strings of grass on it every once in a while? Yeah, I do, but it's nothing major. I clean the hook off maybe every 5th or 6th cast, but I'm not cleaning slop off every single cast. Just by adjusting how I have that hook on this bait, that really impacts how weedless it is. And I can fish some really good slop with it. A lot of times I will cast this in and it goes to the bottom in those gaps in the hydrilla, which is where I like to fish this. That's where I'm getting most of my bites. But I can even drag it along the bottom, just slow dragging that tip right along the bottom, almost like I'm working a shaky head with this tail up in the higher up in the water. You know, it stands above the vegetation and it can really attract those fish. It's a great way to do it. It's a little on the slow side, but in the summertime, a NACO rig, especially rigged with the hook in that direction, can make all the difference, especially in those heavily vegetated areas. So give that a try. I bet you'll be impressed at just how well a NACO rig can work through the grass. Now, another bait that we've talked about before, being pretty weedless, is a spinner bait. Again, this is another open hook design. You know, you've got the hook just sticking out right out there, ready to snag some weeds, but it really doesn't. These are actually pretty weedless. We've talked about a chatterbait before, how weedless a chatterbait is, but this is weedless for a different reason. Whereas on that chatterbait, the blade kind of acts as a guard. That wire being like that splits that vegetation apart and allows that spinnerbait to come through. You say, well, lowbrow, what about the blades? The blades are just going to get gummed up in all that vegetation. No, not necessarily. A lot of times, the blades just stop spinning for a second. As that bait comes through that thick vegetation, these blades will just stop spinning because they don't have the room to spin because the vegetation holds them in place, which keeps them from getting all gummed up. Again, you'll have a few casts, you'll have to pick off a couple pieces of grass, but it's not going to get gummed up. It's not going to get all balled up with slop on every single cast. And that makes being able to work a moving bait in the middle of the water column where you can target those suspending bass. Like we said in the last video, those bass right now, for the most part, are going to be chasing bait. They're going to be chasing those balls of minnows, of fry, of the young of the year from the shad and the shiner and the bluegill. And a spinnerbait is a great way to target that because, well, it impersonates that small school, something that's broken away from the main group, something that's trying to flee the scene, which will attract those bass. Right through the vegetation, I use them all the time in the thick stuff. If I waited to find a presentation, or if I waited for a lure or an occasion where I can only fish hooks clean every single time, I'd be waiting a very long time and I would get to do very little fishing. So this guy right here works way better than you think it does. It works really well. Comes cleaner through that thick stuff a lot better than you think it would. So, you know, give a spinnerbait a try. I'm sure you'll be happy with how well it comes through the thickest slop. Now, lastly, we have kind of a surprise, a wild card. And when I show this one to you, you're going to be like, lowbrow, that is the least weedless bait ever on the planet. But they can be very weedless, especially when you rig them the right way. What am I talking about? A buzzbait. That's right, a buzzbait can go right over the top of some of the thickest slop and come back completely clean. Now, it very much depends on how you rig it. Kind of like the NACO rig. With the NACO rig, we had the hook faced a certain way. With the buzzbait, it's all about that trailer. Right here, I have a Yum tiptoe frog on here. But the thing about it is it's got a wide flat body. It's got those kicking legs. And it creates a lot of drag in the water, which in turn creates a lot of lift. Buzzbait sinks like a stone, so it doesn't really matter what line you have it on. I mean, I'll fish it on monofilament if I have the ability to. I'll fish it on fluorocarbon. I'll even fish it on braid with a fluorocarbon leader. But right here, I've just got 12-pound monofilament on it, and I've got a 7.2 medium heavy with a faster reel. I like the 7.5-to-1 reel when fishing a buzzbait because you've got to keep that buzzbait up. So this allows me to just easy crank it and that buzzbait stays up. It gets that lift. And because a buzzbait, whenever it's worked this way, whenever it's rigged this way, has that natural lift, you'd be surprised at how well it comes through a lot of that really, really thick hydrilla. It can work so well. And again, because that's all I'm fishing, because that's all I have around here is thick vegetated mats, I have to adjust my presentations to account for that. And over the years, I figured out that if you put a wide enough trailer on a buzzbait, something like these will work just as well. That wide, broad body, something like a Berkley Pit Boss. That's another great buzzbait trailer because it's got that wide body. It creates a lot of drag, and it causes this bait to run just a little higher in the water column, causes the trailer to run a little higher in the water column, so we're able to come right through those massive vegetation. Don't believe me? Well, I have the video proof. So check this out. This is me working a buzzbait through some of the thickest slop just the other day. You can usually let the buzzbait pretty much plot its own course through this, because it's going to drift to one side if you let it. but it will also get hung up on everything under the sun if you let it. So as you can see, I pulled it right through that thick grass. I did not avoid it because that's where the big girls are. And I can't always fish a frog. Not only does it get boring, but bass adjust. You have to keep your presentations versatile. You have to show them something different. Otherwise, those bass get attuned to what we're throwing. So instead of just throwing a spook all the time, as a matter of fact, I would rather throw a buzzbait in those areas than a spook because those trebles hanging down from a spook are going to get me snagged a lot more often. And if you get the slightest snag on a spook, it totally kills the action. You go from a walking bait side to side to stick. It just comes right back to you. So that's where a buzzbait can really come into play. I can work it right across that top of that vegetation, right across the top of that hydrilla, and it comes through nice and cleanly. Maybe every 10 casts or so, I might have to stop and pick a little bit of grass out of that little swivel right there, but it's not much. It doesn't really even impact how the bait works. I just clean it out for the sake of it being clean. But try it out. I'm serious. A buzzbait is a great weedless presentation. You can pull it right over the top of that grass, and with these different baits, these different techniques, you can cover the bottom of the water column with that Mako rig. You can cover those suspending bass in the middle of the water column with that spinnerbait. And then you can drag that buzzbait over the top. So with those three presentations, and it's super simple, isn't it? A lot of guys, especially from the bank, they don't have a lot of room. Now, you could say a kayak angler, but have you seen some of those kayaks nowadays? They've got more room on them and more gear than your most expensive bass boat. But still, keep it simple. You've got three presentations. You can actually do it all on one rod if you really wanted to, but two rods is better. A spinner for the Mako rig, and then you can use the bait cast for your spinner bait and your buzz bait. Works out really well. You keep everything in your pockets. You don't have to have a whole bunch of stuff with you, and you're working all three sections of the water column, and you're catching bass. So think about that. If you're struggling with vegetation and you're struggling with being locked into certain lures and presentations, try something different. Try working these through that thick mat, and you'll be surprised not only at how well they come through, but how many fish you'll actually catch. So there you have it. Three pretty out there, non-standard, weedless presentations. It might take a bit of an adjustment, but if you make those adjustments, which are super simple, you'll be surprised at how well you can fish some of the thicker vegetation effectively and have your bait come back clean on every cast. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.